John, we got to remember that John was a fisherman and not a lawyer, not extremely well educated, however, far from illiterate. And yet, he was a guy who, because of his background and his nature, I think he thought in runway terms, okay? I don't think he was up here in the ethereal philosophical clouds. He was down here where we live. And how he wrote what he wrote in First John in terms of style, sometimes we don't look at very closely because we don't treat the Bible as literature. It is more than literature, but it is literature. Now look at First John chapter 1. He does a series of contrasts, and verse 8, 9, and 10, in my mind, are like a sandwich. You've got the negative, the positive, and the negative. Here's the negative. This is verse 8. If we claim to be without sin, we deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just and will forgive us our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness. If we claim we have not sinned, we make him out to be a liar, and his word is not in us. Sometimes I think I love 1 John 1:9 so much that I kind of leave verses 8 and 10 out of the picture. I love the idea that God's justice and his faithfulness are so sure, his forgiveness so complete, that if I confess my sins, I can trust him completely to have accepted the sacrifice of Christ to satisfy justice and forgive me, cleansing me, purifying me from all unrighteousness. How could you not be happy about that? That ought to capture my attention. But see, he has three ifs, right? If we claim to be without sin, and then in verse 9, if we confess our sins, and then again, verse 10, if we claim we have not sinned. Wow. Let's look at verse 10. If we claim we have not sinned. Now, in verse 8, it's kind of a present tense implication. If we claim to be without sin, I have no sin. That's like, present tense. But in verse 10, if we claim we have not sinned, that's obviously past tense. But the point's the same. If I don't acknowledge, if I don't admit that I'm not perfect, if I claim to not have sinned, look at this. We make him, God, out to be a liar, and his word is not in us. All right. This is just me, but for my sense, if I make God out to be a liar, whoa, that's about as deep a dark water as a person could get in, I think. I don't want to be there. God is light, remember, from the first part of this chapter. In him, there is no darkness at all. And so for me to make God out to be a liar would be the dumbest thing I can do. Humans are capable of all kinds of stupid silliness, but we're also capable of addressing the truth. We have to be motivated to do that, though. And John says, if we claim to not have sinned, or if we claimed we have not sinned, wow. Now, here's I guess it might be like splitting hairs, but here's here's the thing. Is there a difference between me claiming to not have sinned and me claiming that my sin is no big deal? I think there's a difference. Whether it's a consequential difference or not, I don't. I'm kind of not quite sure. I will say this. I think they both run on at least parallel tracks and are going in the wrong direction. If I claim not to have sinned, well, all right. I don't think most of us, I can't think of anybody who'd be interested in this little thing that we do here who would say, well, I've really never sinned. I mean, really? So I wonder if maybe John is saying, because see, he's writing to Christians. He's not writing to the world at large. This is not an evangelistic message. This is a message of discipleship written to folks who already believe in Jesus, who are trying to figure out how do they follow him more completely. And to those, us, John writes, it's a big if. If we claim we have not sinned, we make him out to be a liar, and his word is not in us. There are times, and I don't think this is the whole thing, but I think there are times when Christians struggle to admit that they have sinned. I often struggle to admit that I'm wrong. Now, this is important. When I am wrong, I may not always be morally wrong, right? To be wrong may not be a sin. And it's certainly not always a sin. But when I sin, I'm always wrong. Okay. In relationships, I'm thinking now of marriage and family life, and it also goes out from there into your corporate settings of your career and business, if you're in a business with other employees. And it certainly goes over into church life, where we are in this family setting, this fellowship. If we are always right, if it's my way or the highway, aren't we edging fairly close to saying, I have not sinned, I am not wrong? If we're unapproachable with another perspective, I don't know that we're in this bucket, but we're kind of in the vicinity. When couples are more interested in being right and being loving, there's an infinite amount of conflict that awaits them, and usually an intense conflict that is at the doorstep or in the living room, worse yet, in the bedroom. When we will not admit our wrongness, our sin, what keeps us from doing that? What keeps us from admitting our sin? Why would we say, I have not sinned? I think in my life, there's really one motivational bottom line on that, and it is pride. I wonder if pride is not the taproot for all of our human brokenness. And as much as I disagree with full-on 5-point Calvinism, I do believe that we're all broken and depraved. We have to be remade, restored, and this is a process over time. And part of that process is me calling out my own pride. The stakes are high for this. If we claim we have not sinned, we make him, God, out to be a liar, and his word is not in us. Now, I think it ought to just be like big, bright lights, blinking on and off. The idea that I would be making God out to be a liar, well, I don't ever want to do that. And here's the other thing. When I don't acknowledge my sin, not only am I making him out to be a liar, his word is not in me. There's several things about his word not in me that strike me as significant, me personally. First of all, my life's occupation has been, continues to be, to help people figure out God's design for their life. In my counseling, I hate to call it a business, but it is that but before it's a business, it's a ministry. And in my counseling ministry, my motto is helping you find your best life. And right beneath that is, nobody finds their best life until they discover God's design and learn how to walk in it. My driving, compelling desire is to help people figure out what is God's design. And I'm not even just talking about some specific individual thing as though God has a different plan for all of us. I suppose on one level, certainly he does. He's gifted us all differently. And yet on a higher level, his design is not some big mystery. And his design for you on this level is the same as for me. It comes down to this. You find it in Romans chapter 8, verse 29, where he says, "For those he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the likeness of his Son." I look at that and think, here's God's design. His design is that for me, in a progressive, day by day, line upon line, precept upon precept, a process of me maturing so that I think, I feel, and I act as Jesus thought, felt, and acted. Now, why is that important? Well, for me personally, if I deny my sin, then not only am I making him out to be a liar, but his word is not in me. And so I have no right, if his word is not in me, I have no right to try to pass his word along to anybody else, right? That's the epitome of hypocrisy. And here's the second thing. If I'm going to live my life according to his word, I'll be most effective when that is not some external thing, but it is in me. It's as though, and forgive me for maybe overstretching this, but it's almost like John is saying, hey, if you don't admit your own sin, you're calling God a liar, and your heart and mind are Teflon, his word will just slap against and slide right off. It will always be this outside thing that you are going to be constantly pushing against. I don't want to live that way. I don't want you to live that way. And I'm convinced you don't want to live that way. So how do we guard against this? A couple of things quickly. First of all, we have to notice when our pride is keeping us from accepting the truth, acknowledging it. Am I always right? There's, it's a free country. Feel free to either do it my way or just be stupid. It makes a fun joke, but man, if I live that way, I'm making God out to be a liar, and his word is not in me. So start with notice your pride. What do you do about pride? Well, the Bible in a number of places says you mortify it. You kill it off. How do you do that? You kill it with humility. Humility is me recognizing who I really am and that I'm desperate for God to make me who He wants me to be. Well, that's all the time we got today. I'll look forward, I hope, to connecting this way again next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.